Bitcoiners, welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I just sat down with two fantastic entrepreneurs in the Bitcoin space. I sat down with Stephen Dodge and Ian from BYOD. Ian and Stephen are building out a data exchange that is powered by Bitcoin. They think that they can leverage Bitcoin's decentralized storage stack as well as Bitcoin's decentralized money in order to create a better way, a better product for both consumers and advertisers to interface with each other and, market and sell their data. Right now, the way it works is that we are the product as consumers. All of our data is being scraped, and then all of these platforms are monetizing it for themselves, right? They're using us as a product, and their advertisers are advertising on, let's just call it a less than ideal, a less than put together data set, right? They're working with Facebook, they're working with Twitter, they're working with Google, they're working with different, LiveRamp and other ad managers and data management platforms. And it sucks on both ends. Like the current situation on the internet and internet advertising is just not good for anyone, except for maybe the the monopolistic internet companies that have a stronghold on these network effects and this data. But BYOD fixes this, right? Bitcoin fixes this. The infrastructure that is being built because of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin exists and is kind of enforcing that incentive, is hopefully going to make a better and more equitable solution. Ian and Stephen think that they have that solution. They think that BYOD is that solution. And interestingly enough, they are building their solution on the Stacks blockchain. So Stacks anchored into Bitcoin, giving functionality to new types of apps and dApps and things like that we've seen on altcoins. So it's amazing to see this iteration of the Bitcoin ecosystem coming together, competing, absorbing features that make sense, and providing the libraries and the technical infrastructure that these app developers need. You guys, I think you're going to like this podcast. I thought it was really interesting hearing about how BYOD is solving this problem. And I'd be interested to hear from the listeners. What do you think? Does this sound like a solution you'd be into? Does sharing your data at all something that you want to do? Is this direction that you think the decentralized web is going to go, or are they completely off base? I want to hear it all. DM me. Let us know what you think of BYOD. Go hit up these guys, Stephen and Ian. Check out BYOD.exchange. And yeah, enjoy this podcast. Peace. Bitcoiners, welcome back. I'm sitting across the screen from Stephen Dodge and Ian Major from the BYOD project. I'm really excited to have these guys on to talk about how Bitcoin is going to be impacting the world of data and so much more. Bitcoin is that kind of revolution that it really intercepts into everything and infiltrates into everything that is on the internet, and we need it. So without further ado, let's just get right into introductions. Stephen, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. Stephen Dodge, based out of Richmond, Virginia, the founder of BYOD. Have a systems engineer background, and got into Bitcoin probably 5-6 years ago. Kind of out of college. Had a Cisco networking and security background, and just thought it was pretty interesting to see how blockchains and just consensus was met, just from my kind of networking background. And I'll let you go.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks again for having us on. My name is Ian Major. In my previous life, I worked as a business consultant, helping companies kind of test and analyze the impact to new business initiatives. So think, experimentation, data analytics. As part of that, I also got quite a glimpse into this kind of cobbled mess of our current digital marketing paradigm, which is one of the areas we really want to disrupt with BYOD. Similar to Stephen, first became aware of Bitcoin a few years back, but really it was 2019 that I kind of fell down the rabbit hole and have been aggressively tumbling like a rag doll ever since. I also do a YouTube channel and talk about all things Bitcoin, and wish I was as cool as BTC Session. So it's cool to be able to spend ever more time thinking about and now building around Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, I'm excited to talk about how BYOD and Bitcoin are gonna, help bring some transparency and I guess just justice back to the web, if you will. I feel like the fact that the web has been missing, native money is why it's kind of developed into this toxic clickbait wasteland. But I guess before we kind of jump into how Bitcoin and BYOD fixes this, why don't you, in your own words, kind of describe, what you all see as like wrong with the current internet stack and advertising models on the web? I guess I'll just pass it to either of you to kind of jump in.
Yeah. A lot of it's, and I think you probably say it best too, but, it's pretty obvious, that we are the product these days. There's this whole freemium model that you get, with Google services, any service really, that you are the product, that they're just taking that data and, maybe not outright selling it, but, they at least sell audiences and things of that nature. But, I think the real, kind of crime or, issue at hand is just how unaware people are and what their data is worth, but just how it's being used and how it's, kind of, facilitating this, bad relationship, if you will, and the way the internet's been built and structured, just because of this freemium model. But, I think, a lot of the pain points that, have been kind of masked, or, people just say, I don't care. If there's like a data breach or something. We just saw one the other day with the was it the Pegasus spyware that just came out like a day or two ago, or saying, like, hey, people are, spying on your phones, text and everything. Like, it's just kind of become numb to it. But I think, in the near future, as everything is just increasingly digital, people are going to become more aware of, just how scary that can be. If the data gets into the wrong hands. So I think like that's probably the biggest thing that I personally want to go after, is just making people more aware of the, vulnerabilities in their data and the way that this is structured, and just actually how valuable it is. And, the companies that are making billions upon billions using their data, you should get a little cut of that.
Yeah, and for me, there's like a sovereignty element here as well, right? I mean, if our data is this kind of extension of us into cyberspace, there's this question of kind of self-sovereignty, and that's really part of the mission statement for BYOD. And I also think this whole kind of paradigm of, being on some web application, whether it's Twitter or what have you, and you have advertisers just sort of sneaking messages in, right? It's like this very inauthentic experience. And I think we can all kind of acknowledge and appreciate how valuable commerce is and trade and exchange. But it seems like, this whole kind of degree of inauthenticity with which we interact with businesses online via this kind of advertising paradigm really erodes, trust, integrity, et cetera. So I think it goes kind of really, quite deep when you think about it.
Just to piggyback on that real quick too, like the other piece that is just mind-numbing to me when you see these, brands and businesses trying to, push things into your feed, it's just hilarious that there's like really no feedback loop. Like, it really is just a guessing game. Like, I already have these services, or I've already bought this product, and you just still get the advertisements. Like, what a waste of marketing dollars, bandwidth. Just seems like it's so disconnected from reality. Even some of my favorite, I'll say Bitcoin brands, I still get advertisements, and I'm like, I'm never either going to buy this or I've already bought it. Like, stop pushing it to me. So I think that's like, an inefficiency as well in the market.
Yeah, I mean, and I can just add, running Bitcoin Magazine as a Bitcoin oriented media company, monetizing outside of the traditional kind of like Google AdWords display ad model. It's tricky, right? Because it's easy to take the money now, and it's difficult to build an alternative business model. And I feel like a lot of people are just kind of both numb to, but also just accept that this is how the web works, right? And you even get the people who are like, oh, well, I mean, I want them to have my data so that way they can tell me what, I want, and they can help personalize my ads for me. I'm like, all right, well, you clearly have no idea what the problem is here, and, what the second and third order effects are. But yeah, I guess just to kind of like add to that, like, where does Bitcoin come in? Like, how does Bitcoin and what you're building, BYOD, start to make some inroads into solving, let's just say, this unhealthy relationship between consumers, the big web and internet companies, and then the data that's kind of being slushed around in between?
Yeah, so I go first. I think Bitcoin is, really the strongest incentive that we could think and provide, just given that, Bitcoin, is the soundest, hardest money that we've had. Take price appreciation in dollars, whatever fiat you want to say out of the equation. But, if it's an incentive and kind of the ultimate source of truth, everything settles on it. I think it's the strongest incentive we can provide, people like us that are obviously knowledgeable and aware of the situation, but everyday people as well, to break these kind of dynamics between your relationship with the Facebooks, the LinkedIn's, Google's, so on and so forth. And if we can provide that incentive to earn Bitcoin in exchange for your data in a very opt-in manner, or at least maybe not just purely opt-in, but just like saying, hey, I have some level of insight and control over how my data is used, and I can either port it out of these existing platforms and port it into hopefully a new one that we hope we are one, being a part of this large ecosystem and building, that is the incentive that can break again, this what I think is going to come to an end hopefully in the next several years. The relationship between our data and these platforms. So that's where I think Bitcoin comes in first, is the incentive, to get people to port their data out and kind of start earning something for it. But then what comes in the future, I think there's we have a lot of ideas and concepts and iterations, but I think that's kind of TBD.
And one of those as well is like when you think about the storage of the data itself, right? I mean, we can all acknowledge that decentralized data storage is better than centralized data storage. And so, look at the nodes sitting back there, right? A lot of folks are rocking a 1 terabyte, hard drive on their node. And so with the, Bitcoin blockchain sitting at about 350, give or take, gigs currently, there's quite a lot of underutilized space on the, on nodes. And so can we use Bitcoin nodes to create a decentralized data storage network, akin to what some folks may be familiar with like Filecoin or Storage, but do so on a fundamentally kind of Bitcoin based tech stack and hardware stack. So like that's like part of this vision, is not just empowering individuals to take more control of their data, hopefully monetize it, be able to have a novel way to stack sats, but also create this kind of decentralized data layer for the modern web, kind of built on Bitcoin.
Yeah, because you kind of see this, a lot of altcoins and other projects. While I think their overall goals are good and admirable, it's just they've always come. Either like Bat is a good example. The Brave browser. There's something called Swash. Like all these other blockchains and tokens that have kind of taken a stab at this, but like it's usually a token that's not very appealing, or no one's ever heard of it. It's maybe a penny, a couple pennies or something. So it's like it's not going to be very attractive. And two, they've kind of just I wouldn't say set the bar low, but they've offered very limited functionality and kind of scope of what their product does. Like Brave, a good good stab at it, but like good luck beating Chrome out, or Safari out right now. Like a lot of people do use the Brave browser, but why couldn't you maybe do like a browser extension or something, with Bitcoin being kind of the enabler there. And then there's other things like you said, there's obviously Filecoin and Storage doing decentralized data storage, but you've always heard that Bitcoin doesn't have like smart contracts and things like that, from other projects. But if you're probably familiar with Stacks, which we're actually building on, but Stack solves for a lot of that. So we're hoping we can kind of be one of those last pieces that really helps Bitcoin, just provide that full tech stack of everything that you would possibly need kind of in this Web3 world that everybody is talking about in the future.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that when both of you were kind of talking, especially you, Ian, about the Bitcoin infrastructure potentially, laying the groundwork for other use cases. I've said this many times that Bitcoin is the catalyst for building out the decentralized infrastructure, both from an energy perspective, from like energy facilitation, but also in order to give people the incentive to actually self-host, right? Like self-hosting was something that was like required when the internet began, and then it almost got phased out as like the cloud and the centralization across that just became so much more efficient, right? But Bitcoin and private keys and money being information, like that is the incentive to like, hey, I need to know this hardware. I need to have this hardware in a place that I control, and I need to minimize trust there. And that's kind of like this mesh networking kind of infrastructure that it's difficult to catalyze. It's difficult to just get going. And this is where all the altcoins kind of fail as well. It's just this high time preference. We need to build it now, and they're not willing to like let the layers kind of settle, which is what's happening in Bitcoin today.
I think that's well said. In
Completely agree.
fact, I have nothing else to add to that. That was really well
Truth.
put, right? I mean, if you think of if you think a lot of nodes today as this kind of like underutilized asset, that then becomes a pretty easy kind of mental leap for why someone would be willing to apply that hardware to some other use case, be able to stack sats as a result of that. And so I think there's a ton of potential with everything you said. Lots of exciting stuff happening, via the Lightning Network, and so we're hoping we can be a part of it.
So just to kind of like pivot this into BYOD specifically, you mentioned, Stephen, that you're building on top of Stacks, which is a smart contracting side chain for Bitcoin, as well as several other kind of L2 layers. Can you just talk about like what's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem and why is this like the right time for a solution like BOD to start coming together?
Yes, I mean, like, Stacks is, because they launched their 2.0 mainnet, I think January of this year or something, but they've been around for a while. But just seeing the maturity of that platform, one, it's come a long way. So it's one exciting times just because they're enabling this, like you said, smart contract features, apps to be built and still natively settle on Bitcoin. But I think the exciting piece now is just that it's just still so early. It's like there's so much to be built and so much stuff that's already being built now. I think the exciting stuff that where BYOD comes into play is we're um, not piggybacking off of, we're leveraging Stacks and that ecosystem, especially when something coming to like to data ownership, right? We're building a web app, that will use Clarity smart contracts for you to essentially be able to lease access to your data from a willing buyer or app that wants to consume that data, and you would ideally be able to be compensated in Bitcoin or potentially Stacks as well, for any app or whatever that wants to consume that data. So I think that's one piece of BYD that's particularly exciting for me, especially once users really find out that if we are trying to kind of transition and move away from the current system into this new decentralized one, there's lots of apps that are going to be built on Bitcoin and on Stacks, and they'll be kind of new versions. They'll be what we hope is kind of more of like an ad exchange. We could be that first decentralized ad exchange, if you will, that will compensate users for that data, and apps or again buyers want to use it, that they would be compensated for it. Because a lot of people again don't know how much their data is really worth. Facebook, I think in their 2020, it was like 2001 or 2020 or Q4, Q3 something, but essentially they said, hey, if a user is annually, worth about $250 to $450 a year for us, that's a good amount of money for somebody. And you kind of do that cross-platform data aggregation, Google, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, so on and so forth. You're probably looking north of $1,000, in value that you're missing out on every year. And that's just straight up just from like kind of marketing and advertising dollars that are spent. So I think that's what's exciting to me, is that we're really building a user-owned and user-controlled data layer that will compensate, and everybody will benefit more evenly. It'll be spread around. So that's what I'm particularly excited about, and where kind of BYOD really fits in.
I mean, some of the, as you said, like these layers sort of settling, it's the gradually then suddenly meme, right? With all these pieces. And so, 2.0 Stacks mainnet, as Stephen noted, going in January, and you look at what's possible. They're doing their accelerator program, and you look at the kind of breadth of companies and use cases that are sort of going through that and building on Clarity. I mean, it's really, really exciting, and it's moving unbelievably fast. And so I think that timing is really what helps enable some of these more complex use cases when you start to think about data ownership and sort of data sharing in the context of smart contracts, et cetera. So I think that the timing couldn't be better.
A big thing too about this is like what we're hoping to provide, and what we would we know, and it's maybe not for everybody. Like there's definitely going to be privacy concerned people that are never going to use or want to sell their data. That's fine, but just hopefully the ease of ability, we can allow somebody to port kind of their existing digital footprint and profile into this kind of new world. Should be fairly easy, actually. These big tech platforms have kind of shot themselves in the foot due to GDPR compliance and just other privacy rights that they have to abide by. But you can go into Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, so on and so forth, and just literally download your data. They have to make it very easy, and it comes down to this nice structured format, JSON or HTML, and then you just plop it into BYOD, and we're kind of creating this very unique data set that's never been aggregated before, because LinkedIn's not going to share data with Google's not going to share their data with Facebook. So really anchoring the data to you as a consumer, it's one, the first time it's really been done, but two, it's just hopefully very easy to port and kind of start anew in this Bitcoin enabled world.
All right, let's take a quick break from that episode. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor. It is Bitcoin 2022 conference. I am sure you saw the videos. You may have been there in person. Bitcoin 2021 was an absolute smashing success. It was the biggest conference in Bitcoin history, crypto history, whatever history of the digital asset sphere. Bitcoin is number one, and the Bitcoin 2021 conference is number one with a bullet. It was an absolutely incredible time. I was working my ass off the whole time, but I got to meet so many incredible community members. And I think the best testament to how amazing Bitcoin 2021 was not just all of the amazing, accolades and compliments that I got personally and our team got, but also it's the skin in the game in Bitcoin 2022. We have already sold close to 1,500 tickets. That is more than 10% of the people, everyone who went to Bitcoin 2021 have already purchased tickets to Bitcoin 2022. We have not released a date. We have not released a city. We have not released anything. That is the biggest compliment. That is the biggest skin in the game of the community being down for this conference. Bitcoin 2022 is going to be bigger than Bitcoin 2021. It is going to be better than Bitcoin 21 in every single way. And we are going to be bringing you the best opportunity to mingle with the biggest, the baddest, the most Bitcoin people on the planet. So join the revolution. Go to b.tc/conference. Get your tickets today. I don't know what the ticket prices are. They are going up. I think they're $249 right now. We just rolled out fiat ticket purchases. All the tickets purchased before today were all purchased in BTC. So get it, guys. Get it. Get this ticket. Be at Bitcoin 2022. See you there. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you guys about The Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is a new premium newsletter from the Bitcoin Magazine team in conjunction with my man, BTCization, Dylan LeClaire. Dylan is such a multifaceted and wide-ranging analyst. He does everything from on-chain analytics to macro analysis to hash rate and all that kind of good stuff. He does it all. He breaks down everything that's happening every single day with his daily dive. He's going to dive into what is happening in the market that day. So that way you don't have to pay attention to Twitter. You don't have to pay attention to anything else. You can just pay attention to the deep dive, and he has you covered. And at the end of the week, guess what? You get a weekly recap. And at the end of the month, hey, we have a freaking report, a beautiful PDF breaking down all the activity of that entire month, what it means for Bitcoin, what you can expect moving forward. The Bitcoin market is going to moon. We are here to make sure that we maximize your stack. Go to members.bitcoinmagazine.com to sign up today. And if you use promo code BITS, you can get 1 month for free. So again, the deep dive, I've been checking it out every day, and you should too. Back to the show. So I'm on your website right now, and I'm glad that you started to kind of explain at least like the initial manual process of downloading data from these providers, uploading them to create kind of a uniquely aggregated profile on BYOD. I'm assuming bring your own data is the acronym there, but the end goal is you're trying to build this 24-hour marketplace. Can you just talk a little bit about like the envisioned UX and feel of like how a consumer would actually do this, maybe post the beta phase, and when you guys feel like you're more ready for the mainstream?
Yeah, I'll say I could probably speak quick to it, and then if you wanted to get to it, I'd say the biggest piece right now is definitely that it definitely is going to have a more programmatic ability to kind of hopefully to provide a feedback loop into the existing platforms. With OAuth, we're trying to you can request a lot of data from a profile on a platform, with certain OAuth scope and parameters. But initially downloading that data, like you're just not going to get that data set with OAuth or just anything else. Like you have to go in and download it. Like I don't really want your pictures or anything right now, but yeah, unfortunately, it is just going to be that manual process of going in and downloading your data. But really, it is just a few simple clicks. And then, it comes in the zip file and then just throw it in there. And then BYOD, we know what the structure of this data looks like because everybody's is typically the same. Like you might have some missing folders or something based on what you do on these platforms. But then, yeah, once that's done, ideally, yes, we'll have, APIs, or this will be open source, that there'll be other, abilities to have other, platform services, whatever, what have you, be able to consume and, ingest this data. So then there'll be kind of a more, streamlined process from there out after you've taken that data kind of manually once, and then hopefully we can just do, incremental updates, or just, you're off of it for good. But that's kind of the idea so far. But yeah, it's just a simple click, drag, drop, and the, marketplace that we're facilitating. That's more of a, notification type system. Like you could set, okay, I want to, offer up my personal information, maybe my interest, my likes, pages that I go to, whatever they flagged as my ad interest, and actually kind of do it more of like a Tinder platform, like, oh, this is a relevant, data element. This is not. Oh, this is something I'm willing to sell. This is what I'm not. And then as, bids and offers come in, you'd say, hey, Michael Kors or Nike wants to lease your data for, 6 months in exchange for, $5 in sats or something. Do you approve or do you not? You could also say so like auto accept, or, has to reach like a certain amount, things like that. But it'd be a pretty intuitive interface, easy to use. And, as of right now, it is a web app, but we really want to make sure that it's, mobile friendly. Mobile first is, most people are on mobile these days. But that's the idea right now, and at least the scope of what we're building.
I think a big part of this is, of course, like helping individuals towards the creation of data elements that are going to be, extremely valuable. I mean, if you think of the common categories of sort of buyers today, yeah, of course, there's advertisers and, data brokers. Those are probably two big categories. And what we've heard from some of our initial kind of conversations with these types of entities is that, like, you'd be surprised, right? I mean, it's a hundreds of billion-dollar industry for data brokerage, right? And so in the U.S., think of like the Experians of the world, the LiveRamps of the world, the Axioms, Data Logics, all these guys, and the sort of cobbled, view that they scrape together through all sorts of creepy methods. Like the accuracy of that really ends up being quite poor. And so you, the individual owner, as this kind of anchor point, really does add significant value to that resulting data set. And so, the most common kind of use case from a buyer side might be, I would love to have a list of individuals that kind of share these traits, right? Like similar to what happens today. But the big difference is we hope that this is just, it's happening out in the open, right? It's me, the individual owner of data, willingly sort of sharing or leasing information about myself. And hopefully that comes back not just in the form of, sats as like explicit compensation, but also even more kind of tailored products and offerings that, I actually care about, as opposed to what the big ad platforms think I care about or have inferred that I care about, when in fact that may not necessarily be true.
And so, correct me if I have this wrong, but from my understanding, BYOD, you think that it's going to create a better data set, and you think that consumers will actually kind of self-report and upload this kind of data, because it will give them the ability to monetize it directly. So if you say you're going to improve two aspects, one, you're going to create a better product for the advertisers because they're going to have a cleaner self-reported data set, opt-in data set. And then on the flip side, from the consumer, the incentive for them to opt in is because at least, if this data is being collected, scraped already, at least with BYOD, they can monetize it and earn sats.
Yeah, I think that's a good recap. I mean, from my kind of prior life as a consultant, I would interact fairly frequently with, senior kind of marketers in these organizations. And one of the big things they are really, really wrestling with, as you would guess, is around privacy. And so the idea of being able to engage in this way with the actual end owners of the data is sort of by definition future proofed in terms of privacy, right? It doesn't really matter how regulations evolve. If you're buying from the source, then that helps, right? And that feels like a good hedge for them. We're certainly never going to kind of I don't want to say never, but out of the gate at least, we're not going to achieve the same sort of scale of the data set. However, in terms of richness, accuracy, we believe this will have a significant advantage that would, entice some of these kind of buying entities to come in. You sort of imply a really important note as well, which is like, well, how do you ensure that data quality? Like, what stops me, a user, from just kind of tossing a bunch of junk in? And there's definitely kind of guardrails that we can put in place to help with that. There can also be kind of a two-way, almost rating or sort of scoring, right? If my data is found to, be inaccurate or not quality, there could be kind of a feedback loop that kind of, may score me, the user, as maybe not fully truthful, or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, I'd say I agree. And, we've seen other, ideas that, just from speaking to people at the conference, but, those two I definitely are the core and scope of what we're going for now. But there's, potential B2B plays as well. Businesses might be sitting on data, that is, typically not sellable. They can anonymize it. So there's definitely B2B plays. But I think, Ian, you hit on that point of, just being kind of future proofed or, compliant for, who knows what GDPR, the California Consumer Privacy Act or whatever that one is. There's just a lot of I think value to the businesses, as well as being very transparent and offering the data that they have to their users. Just not simply, hey, I'm accepting all the cookies, or I want to be able to just request my data. I want to be able to have influence and control over it in a easy to use platform.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I'm excited to see how this, pans out. I think that, having a native internet currency is going to enable a lot of use cases similar to this that was just never possible before. Even just yesterday, saw the Department of Justice saying that they will potentially pay out anonymous contributors for helping them fight ransomware with cryptocurrency. So the fact that Bitcoin does exist as native money that advertiser A can just send to user B, it was just never really possible. So it's really awesome to just kind of see this coming together. I know, the actual product has quite a bit of time between now and when you're projecting a launch. Do you want to talk a little bit about the roadmap and, when users can kind of expect to get their hands dirty?
Yeah. So, we have early access sign up. We'd, initially started building this in one manner, and then we, kind of started taking a second look at Stacks kind of right before the conference. And so we were like, all right, Stacks has come a long way. Looks really good. So we kind of scrapped what we were building it on. So we're not necessarily starting from ground zero, but doing a rebuild, if you will. The hope is, let's say optimistic end of the year, but more than likely Q1 of next year, just because we're really kind of focused in on this node operating kind of phase right now, where if you're a node operator, can we at least get this kind of base level of node operators to store data, facilitate this decentralized this marketplace. But yeah, early access signups really help. Looking for feedback as well, and obviously anybody from the community that would be interested in joining our team, as we do run kind of two startups. But that would be interested in helping us build it. Clarity smart contract developers are in high demand and not much supply. So that would be one thing we would definitely want to look for. Other than that, Ian, I don't know if there's really too much else. We just kind of got our heads down building.
Yep, I would say that's right.
Okay, tell me a little bit. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about Stacks, because I've spoken to Manib a couple of times, and I know that with the Stacks 2.0 launch, it really implemented kind of this new level of direct connectivity to Bitcoin and the Bitcoin asset on the blockchain. Can you just talk a little bit about beyond the efforts that they're making, just what is it like building on Stacks? Maybe what makes Stacks different than other alternative solutions, like building on Ethereum, building on RSK, building on Liquid? building on Lightning. Why Stacks? What is it like? Just give me a little bit more insight into what impressed you so much about that ecosystem.
Yeah, just their libraries, documentation. Just it's come a long way. It's pretty mature now. Everything is much easier to build, just given it's JavaScript. We were building the web app in Angular, and they have libraries and whatnot for that. So that was just a plus. We were originally actually trying to see if we could build this on storage. If anyone's familiar with storage, which again is a sound project, like what they were doing, but we just didn't feel like we needed the storage token, and it just had very limited functionality and what we needed. So when we looked over at Stacks, we're like, hey, this solves for smart contracts, solves for basically all the libraries that we would need. Build is just simpler. And with the smart contracts with Clarity, is A is A. It's no guesswork in what could be the outcome. So that's just much cleaner, just easier build. And the accelerator is a big one too. We are hoping to get into the second cohort. We had just apparently missed the first one, but it looks like they have some cool projects and making a lot of progress with that. But our hope is that we can apply and maybe get in with the second one and start building with their team.
Yeah, I think as you alluded to, Steve, like Clarity as a language itself versus Solidity in the kind of Ethereum world certainly carries benefits for some of these more complex use cases, being an interpreted language, not being Turing complete, so you can kind of avoid certain bugs before kind of deploying things. And so for all those reasons, I think it's a really appealing ecosystem to build in and on.
And the Stacks token is interesting too, just from the fact that you can. We've thought about like this staking your data concept, but you can actually earn Bitcoin for staking Stacks, and there's an interesting dynamic there that I think would obviously be reciprocal to both. So we've been kind of toying with a couple ideas and ways to maybe enable something like that as well. But it just seems like overall that ecosystem is just it's got the people behind it that we know, all know very well in the community. But just from like a technical and build perspective, it's just, a much clearer path and probably less resistance than the one we were going for. So that'll be what we use. And that's the plan we'll use for now.
And I guess just to kind of compare and contrast to maybe like a Liquid or an RSK, why is Stack's ecosystem more appealing than theirs to be building a solution like that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Stacks really is like unique in that it's it's just kind of standalone blockchain. The hashes for its smart contracts are hashed into the Bitcoin blockchain. And so, a Stacks miner is reading the state of kind of both of these, both of these blockchains. And so, I think there's certain advantages of that over something like a sidechain. There's definitely this like bootstrapping aspect in relation to their consensus mechanism. So this kind of like proof of transfer consensus mechanism, wherein you basically have Stacks miners that are expending Bitcoin, right, in a way that they're never going to get that back. And so in a way, it's sort of extending Bitcoin's proof of work. And that helps with this kind of bootstrapping of the network, as opposed to like a merged mine, chain where you might have, hash rate being dedicated both to Bitcoin, and this kind of merged mine sidechain or what have you. So there are I think some interesting challenges that Stacks solves for by being this kind of standalone blockchain, albeit anchored into Bitcoin for final settlement. And so the way that they've built it is, if you wanted to go and reorg the Stacks blockchain, like that is equivalent to needing to reorg the the Bitcoin blockchain, right, which is a sort of insurmountable kind of task. And so I think just the optionality that as a standalone not necessarily kind of sidechain provides is appealing. That being said, this space is evolving so rapidly that I'm sure on both sides of those different categories, side chains, standalone blockchains anchored into Bitcoin, right? Like we're going to see developments on kind of both ends, and so it'll be really interesting to watch.
Before we get back to the episode, I want to tell you guys about Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin Magazine is the oldest publication covering Bitcoin, and we've been covering Bitcoin since 2012. Y'all, I'm so proud to be working for Bitcoin Magazine. We spend all day trying to scour the internet for the top news, the top plebs, the top subjects, conversations, everything that has to do with BTC, the asset, BTC, the culture, BTC, the revolution. We are here for it. We are here for BTC and BTC only, and we want to give back to the Bitcoin community. Hit us up if you want to contribute. And go follow us on Twitter. Go subscribe to this podcast. Go follow us on YouTube. All of the places that you can find Bitcoin Magazine, we are there. Instagram, Reddit, everywhere. We're there. We're there. Follow us for the best Bitcoin knowledge. Back to the episode. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about something that you two brought up multiple times, which is, data storage, privacy, how that kind of works. You discuss, interest in storage, which is similar to Filecoin, which is kind of like this decentralized AWS, if you will. I guess let's just talk a little bit about like this challenge that's ahead is like actually building out this infrastructure and maybe even, how the data is kept in a fashion that is like kind of secure for the user, because obviously they are providing very sensitive information that, maybe they're trusting Google or Facebook to hold on to, but those are very competent centralized organizations, if you will, and they're not bringing all that data together. It's not, necessarily, co-located and congregated in one place, essentially is like, BYOD could be building a massive honeypot, and that's why the storage aspect is so important. So I guess back to you, Stephen.
Yes, I mean, the idea is like when you would say plop this data in there that I'm sure you're probably familiar with Umbrel. We'd want it to be as easy as like, install the BYOD app or something, on your node. And then, we would obviously need to parse and be able to kind of, let's say, look through this data, obviously, but we would want to do all that on the client side, kind of in, your own container. And then figuring out, whatever data that is, whatever it spits out is valuable, whatever data elements, come out in the UX UI that you'd want to be able to say, okay, hey, again, this is the data that, you have, this is what you want to keep, this is what you want to discard, clean it for inaccuracies, whatever, kind of build this digital data profile. And then, we would store it kind of just like storage does, where you do this kind of erasure encoding bit where you take the file, cut it up into a bunch of pieces, store a little bit here on this node, a little bit here on that node, a little more on this node. And all that data is obviously encrypted. And then again, that's where, smart contracts come into play. It's just, hey, this data is not readable or accessible unless you have, approved or granted access to it. And, whatever those terms and conditions are, that viewer or reader, whoever, is getting access to this data, whether it be an entity, person, service, platform, app, whatever, can't view it until you've agreed to those terms. But that'd be the idea is like, again, we like storage the best, just the way they did it. Just because, again, breaking up this file, like if you had all your data on your node and that drive goes down, sure you could have backups, but, backups are getting pretty complicated as well. But like, that data's gone. You might just start the whole process over again. So doing it in, the way storage does it with erasure encoding and, again, scattering this data file, data element, if you will, across many nodes, it's much easier to rebuild and access and kind of, decreases the attack vectors. So should be more secure, should be actually better performance. Obviously, once you start getting into like and other, things of other nature, then it could get complicated. But, ideally, then we'd be able to hopefully incentivize, different maybe Raspberry Pi setups and different configurations, maybe a little more RAM, maybe a little more bandwidth or something. You get compensated in sats or something for providing that. So, not necessarily taking the playbook from these, other ones, but, definitely learning and using, some of the value adds that they've done. So that's what the hope is, and that's how it works.
Well, I have to say that what they all get wrong is that they're not using a money in their system, and they're trying to like create this token in order to make it happen. And it's just that is the flaw of most altcoin projects, is that there's a little bit of just like a base misunderstanding of money.
Yeah, and some of these, have gotten like pretty. I mean, they've definitely increased their use cases, and like not saying we wouldn't go into this as well, but some of these like Filecoin, you got to have some pretty crazy hardware if you want to be a miner for them, which is, you're not talking a small expenditure, you're 5 figures, which most people won't have. So, to start, just simple files, the ones we're getting, even if you downloaded and aggregated all of your data from all your social media profiles, if you took out the videos and images, like you're maybe at a couple gig, maybe that's a lot. Like these file sizes are not big. So if you're just, kind of pinging and querying this data, it should be pretty quick. And, we can have somebody else rely on kind of the compute side of things in the future, but we'll see where it leads.
And indeed, like some of the platforms you mentioned earlier, Stephen, who have tried this kind of, monetization of your data aspect, right? I mean, they end up spending kind of half their time promoting, this random token, and then half the time building the product, and
Right.
and it somewhat shows. And so, for not just that reason, but when you think of data as this sort of commodity in our kind of, ever increasing digital world, like you need that to be inextricably linked to or linkable to money, and Bitcoin is that money, right? And it's sort of proven itself over time, and that's why we're really excited to to build on kind of a fully Bitcoin tech stack.
Yeah, no other platform can, or no other chain can say, stack sats. Nobody wants to, I don't even know, fold file coins or stack storage tokens. You want to stack sats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, that's the layering thing, right? And
Yeah.
why this needs to happen in layers. I have one more question, just kind of about the product experience, and then we can kind of wrap this one up. But I'm just curious, like, how does leasing or renting data work, right? Like, how do you give access to an advertiser to your data set, and then reliably know that they're not they're not essentially copying that and then just building
Yeah.
their own profile of you.
Yeah. So we ideally, we want to facilitate, be the marketplace, but we're not going to necessarily try to like matchmake, if you will, too much, like, because we can't see that data. But at work, obviously we'd have APIs, the ability to, again, kind of feed this data to a buyer. But it would be up to you. So you get examples. Again, just say Nike comes to you and says, "Hey, we want to lease your data for 6 months." You could again set this to kind of like, for lack of a better word, it's like programmatic access, or they Nike could only get the ability to like put their hands in the black box and tinker, manipulate the data, but they couldn't actually download, pull it down. Kind of like a read only, online read only, if you will. If a seller wants to offer a buyer them the ability to do that, like, so be it. That's up to them. But the idea is that we would be building all those tools and services as much as possible on the buyer side, so that they keep coming back to the platform instead of pulling it down and putting it in their own tools or whatnot. We want to keep them coming back. So that's really how we envision it now, is hand in the black box, have all the tools and services necessary to manipulate and do what you will with the data. And then it can spit a meaningful output, or you could connect to some other platform or service, what have you. But yeah, the idea is that you wouldn't be able to take this data off of it. Only the consumer has that ability. Otherwise, it's you're kind of right back where you started.
And I think we're going to see, ever more sort of perfection of that interaction model as we see more with like decentralized IDs. I know like Ion, project with Microsoft using kind of Bitcoin is a very interesting example of that. That's also within the stacks kind of scope. And so I just think the sort of scaffolding and kind of execution that goes around that, whether it's like a ad execution, things like that, like it's just not sufficiently developed to make it like really, really, really clean. But I think we'll get there in pretty quick time. But that would be like the ideal case, is you're operating with these decentralized IDs as opposed to any kind of PII.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, it was great getting to learn a little bit more about BYOD, and a potential more equitable future for data usage and sales. I'm very interested to see how this path kind of evolves with everything else that's kind of evolving in the ecosystem. But the best that we can do is just kind of watch and see, and see what happens with BYD and other solutions. But until then, again, really excited to have this solution getting built. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, as this comes together, what the one thing I'm sure of is that Bitcoin is enabling a world that is going to hopefully be better than the one that's built on Web 2.0, and is going to just enable better experiences and more control for the users.
Totally agree, and we're excited to be a part of it. For kids and everyone, family sake. Let's hope we can build this quickly.
Let's hope so.
World's looking a little nutty, but we'll keep our heads straight and focus, and keep our heads down and build.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, Ian, thank you again for coming on. I want to give you both each a chance to give a last word to the Bitcoin Magazine audience. So let's start with you, Stephen.
Yeah, no, again, appreciate the time. Definitely enjoyed talking to you here, and definitely enjoyed our time, exhibiting and sponsoring at the Bitcoin conference in Miami. That was quite a fun experience. Like you said, I still think recovering. Some of our teammates, like, we just met up this past week, and we just looked at each other and we're like, what a week. But it was definitely fun, and just looking forward to anybody that wants to go to the site, www.byod.exchange for now. And if they want to sign up for early access, whether they're a buyer or a seller of data, we'll send out an email whenever the product is about to go live. And also just looking for anybody in the community that's interested in getting involved in Bitcoin projects. We're definitely looking to bring people on board that can help us build this quicker and more efficiently. So definitely anybody, if they want to reach out, they can reach out through there, or just email me at Stephen with a PH, STEPHEN .Dodge, DODGE, and that's at regular.io, regulr.io, from our kind of parent startup.
Yeah, I would just say shout out to the community. Thanks to those of you who have already kind of provided thoughts and feedback on this. We would love to hear from more of you. Shout out to the plugs for keeping us humble and hungry as always. But we're really excited to be on this journey. And I think when we think about a sovereign individual, right, there's multiple elements to that, and we firmly believe that data really is this kind of layer that hasn't to date been talked about as much as the obvious monetary element of it. And so we're excited to be on this journey and welcome any and all feedback, input, that folks have. So cheers.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you too for hopping on. I'll make sure to put everyone's Twitter handles, emails, all that good stuff into the show notes. So have no fear there. To the Bitcoin Magazine audience, thanks so much for joining in on this podcast. You know where to find me at CK_Snarks on Twitter. You can find all of our content at Bitcoin Magazine. Peace.
Awesome. See you guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.